talk about some very important vocabulary for working with ceramics, and that has to do with the state of the clay. So a lot of times when we're talking about the state of the clay, I'm talking about it in terms of moisture content, like does it have a lot of water in it, is it really wet, or is it totally dried out? And so there's a couple terms that go along with that. So the wettest state of clay is called slip, and that's where it's basically liquefied clay. And the next state, and the state that you're going to use it the most in, is wet. So this is wet clay. You know, you can squish it in your hands, you can mold it, right? I can take a little bit and roll a coil in it, right? Like this is wet clay. It does what my hands are forcing it to do, essentially. And wet clay is in what we call its plastic state. And so when clay is plastic, that means it's really flexible, it's bendable. See, I can like bend this coil and it doesn't break. And so that's wet clay or plastic clay. And when you've made something with clay and you let it dry out a little bit, it becomes leather hard. Now this is no longer plastic. If I were to drop this, it would crack and break. It's dried out to that point, but it still has some moisture content in it. As I'm touching it, I can feel that it's a little cool. That tells me that there's still some water in the clay. And it feels, you know, I might describe the texture as kind of like chocolate maybe. So when clay is leather hard, it can be handled without losing its form, right? Like you can see I'm turning this and it's not flopping or anything like that. I'm not worried about leaving fingerprints in it, things like that. And so when clay is leather hard, it's pretty strong. And I like it in this state for things like trimming or carving. And then whenever your clay is dried out completely, that's called bone dry. And so bone dry pieces are really fragile because that means that all the water is evaporated out of the clay. When I'm touching this, it feels room temperature, it doesn't feel cold, like kind of like the leather hard piece. And look at this color difference, right? This leather hard piece that still has water in it is a lot darker. Whenever all the water evaporates out of your clay, it becomes much lighter. And so when a piece is bone dry, then it's ready to be fired in the kiln. And after that first firing, the clay goes through a chemical transformation and it becomes this rock hard ceramic. All right, and so after a piece is fired once, we call it a bisque firing. It's really strong, and you can handle it no problem. And we usually bisque fire a piece so that it's strong enough for glazing and decorating. But there's no altering a piece when it's bisque. It's going to stay that way forever. You can't reclaim bisque or anything. When we're reclaiming clay, we can reclaim wet, leather hard, and bone dry. But once a piece has been fired, you absolutely cannot reclaim it again because it's become a different material. And so after a piece is bisqued, then we can go ahead and glaze it. And glazing is a way that we add color and seal the surface so that it's watertight. So you can see, you know, on the inside of functional pottery, you glaze the inside because that's where the liquid's gonna go, and you can see it shiny. And so that's just glaze firing. So the bisque firing is usually fired at a lower temperature. Usually it's somewhere between cone 08 and 04, and then glaze firing is usually at a higher temperature. So just to recap, we have liquefied clay is slip. This is wet or plastic, leather hard, bone dry, bisque, and glazed, right? So this is moldable, this is strong and something you can handle. This is very fragile, ready to fire, can't alter it at this point. This is bisque fired, that's fired once, so it's permanent now. And then this is glaze fired, ready to go.